Good Wednesday to you, everybody in Com 710. Welcome to week 2. Ba-bam. How's everybody doing? You doing okay? Did you have a nice, little 3-day weekend, a little chance to relax, refuel, speaking of which? Tea this afternoon instead of coffee. Keep the jitters away. Okay, welcome again to another video. This is the second week, Com 710. Before we get to the readings from last week and say a little something about that, few items to cover. First and foremost, I know I sent this out last week, but just as a friendly reminder, your class participation, that's your first assignment. If you're in group 1, that's due the 29th of this month, so that's like about 10 days plus 1. And excuse me, if you're in group 2, that's due on the 5th of February. Why, did the groups get grouped the way they did? Just the luck of the draw. I just, took alphabetically and sort of split it in half and said, okay, this group goes here and this group goes there. For the next presentation, maybe I'll flip it. And if you're in the second half on the ABCD scale, then you'll go first. And if you're in the first half, you'll go second. All right. And I divided it up so each of us would have a chance to view work from other people and have a chance to give some input. All right. So secondly, also in the assignment folder, note that the instructional sheet for your research paper is up. Go over, download it, print it out. I'm not going to talk about it much here because I think it's pretty straightforward there. But only to note a couple of things. Number one, you get to pick your own topic. That's up to you. But it must have an international communication hook, some kind of an angle. All right. So you compare something between two countries. You take a look at something in another country, whatever. It's got to be international. That's the first thing. And then secondly, please note that it's one paper done in 2 parts. It's not 2 papers. I'm not asking you to do excuse me, I'm not asking you to do something twice. I'm asking you to do the first bit, hand it to me. I'll give you feedback. Sorry, what's going on here? Oh, I really need the coffee. I'll give you feedback and then give it back to you. And then when you take, and I'll give you this, when you do the second part, okay, you take the feedback from the first part, correct the first part, and then correct those issues in advance. That is before you hand the whole thing into me for the second part. And so this way you get some, what I hope is a meaningful evaluation from me. And I get to learn more about you. Having a big stack of papers at the end of the semester doesn't do anybody any real good. All right, at least that's been my experience. And then finally, discussion boards. I put this in the syllabus. I said this during the welcoming video. I will emphasize this again. You must participate in the discussion boards. You must participate in the discussion boards. Let me see. What was the one thing I was going to say? Oh, yeah, you must participate in the discussion boards. Not just in this class, but across the board for classes that I've taught at Regent. If I could put my finger on the one area in a class where people stumble, and it really affects the outcome, their grade, discussion boards. So for instance, week 1, this last week, almost 30% of the class, that's 1 in 3 of you, fell below the required participation rate. Youch. Don't do that. Okay? You're leaving points on the table, folks, and you need to make sure that you're reading through the material so that you have a command of it that you can use it. All right? So do the discussion boards. Okay, let's take a look at the questions from last week, from the readings. This is our foundational week. That is the week 1. We're reading about, what is theory? In the sense of, what are media elements? How do we identify them? So, because here's the challenge. When you're looking at something cross-culturally, that is internationally, you have to you have to determine what might be best called some sort of a culturally unbiased measure by which you evaluate the thing. Now, as I'm going to touch on in a question a little bit down the line here, that doesn't mean you don't have your own values, and that doesn't mean that you can't have a hierarchy of values. But what we're after here is understanding. So we've got to construct some methodological I should say, some methodological system of constructed tools, meaning how we go about it, that allows us to analyze, categorize, and understand media processes in other cultures that are not our own. All right, and that's not to take away from our culture or take away from that culture. We're here as investigators. Okay, so that's what we're doing, or we did, I should say, in week number 1. Okay, let's take a look at the questions. Why is it essential, speaking of how we identify things internationally, to identify media elements when developing a methodology to compare global media systems? In writing your response, be sure to cite the text. I should put that after every question. Be sure to cite the text. Be sure to cite the text. I want you to get into the habit of supporting what it is that you say with evidentiary citations, with sources. Okay? Anyway, let's see what you did. Okay. Acacia or Acacia, and if I mispronounce your name, please tell me. Okay. I like what you're doing here, and let's take you. You say, according to McKinsey, elements are the fundamental components of a media system. Without elements, the media system does not function. Yeah, all right. Yeah. McKinsey suggests that it is essential to identify the media elements when developing a methodology because, here we get to the important bit, the elements can change. In other words, in this culture, you have some elements and they're applied in some ways. In this culture, you have some other elements and they're applied in other ways. If that is the case, then other elements can change as well, if not all of the elements. Okay, not really. You don't need that. Get that out. But here's where you put your finger right on it and you do a good job. In other words, without the proper identification of the elements, there can be no properly developed methodology. Secondly, some elements will have a greater influence on the media system in different conditions. Conditions understand as cultural context than other elements. But bam! So it's important to have sort of a almost you can look at it as like having an agreed upon system or identification of media elements. It's like markers on a ruler, some way by which to measure, not in a comparative, like, oh, this one's taller than this one. No. But some way to take the measure of the operation of media in different cultures, and that's why it's important. Okay, and in fact, in terms of the why, and you should just take this as a given. When I'm asking, and you did a good job with the answer, by the way. But when I'm asking you what I really want you to get at is the why. So Olivia, let's see what you said, because I think you grabbed a hold of the why. According to McKinsey, Chapter 3, media systems are composed of 9 elements, cultural, and you give them all. According to McKinsey, it's essential to identify these media elements when developing methodology comparison of systems for clarity, to elicit a fair and objective assessment of media across countries. Comprehensiveness, to reveal broader and deeper picture of attributes of media systems. Commonality versus incongruence, to generate discussion about the particulars of any media system. Bam, perfect. So take those 2 answers, put them together. That's exactly what we're looking for. Good job. Okay, question number 2. Why, according to McKinsey, and then from Chapter 3, is it important to employ a rhetorical perspective to select elements by which we might evaluate the look, sound, and feel of a media system? Marquette, I like what you're doing here. It is important to employ a rhetorical perspective to select elements by which we might evaluate look, sound, and feel, because a rhetorical perspective attempts to provide reasonable interpretations of meaning for how the world is seen from a particular vantage point. Boom! Perfect. Because what we're not trying to do is say, Oh well, over in China, and they have their media being state run, and they have social rankings and points, and oh, how horrible! Look, because you talk about something, and you're knowledgeable of that something, and you're able to describe that something, doesn't mean that you're selling it. Okay, so we need to be objective. Okay, accordingly, back to your answer, Marquette. Accordingly, a rhetorical perspective on a vantage point of media system attempts to tie potential meanings to knowledge available through the media system. Good. That is excellent. And while we're on this point, I saw, I should say, in last week's discussion boards, there are some of you that are sort of answering the question with a value judgment in mind. That is, some of you, or some answers are like, the nature of media and its control over this, that, and the other. When media controls this and media controls that, and we all know that it's true. And we're off to Hades in a handbasket, this sort of thing. Okay, now let me be very, very clear about why I'm stopping here and making this point. First and foremost, by way of thinking, by way of writing, by way of communicating as communication scholars, such as you are. Bear in mind, all of you are doctors in training. Avoid sweeping statements that are not supported by statistically significant evidentiary sources. That you should make a rule, whatever the thing is. And yes, I know this is the discussion boards, and I don't expect long citations where your answers are concerned. Okay, but get in that as a mental habit. All right. Second, I want you to avoid value judgments in your answers. Now, I'm not saying that how we look at the world is value free and it's amoral. Oh, there's no good or there's no bad. We just can't say. No, I'm saying that it is our job, what we're up to here in this class and in the program in becoming doctors. It's our job as scholars to understand the actions of others by getting at the why, regardless of whether we think the behavior is good, bad, ugly, or beautiful. That's not part of the equation. Now, it can be, but as far as what we're doing here, we're trying to get at the why. And let me give you an example. I spent many years studying the ideological and operational structure of the Islamic State of the Levant, ISIL or ISIS, Islamic State of Syria and Iraq. Okay. I've read many of their publications. I even had an interview exchange with a high-ranking commander in the Iraqi army who joined ISIS. I did all of this to deepen my understanding of their ideology and resulting behavior, not because I wanted to run off and join the caliphate, which you don't, because they're crazy in how they operate. But it wasn't possible as a researcher that I was going to come to an operational, that I was going to be able to give a good description of why it is they did what they did without an operational understanding of what they thought. I didn't agree with it. I got to tell you, in reading some of their stuff, it was brutal because, graphic, horrifically graphic, both in image and in word. But the question was, from a communication perspective, what's going on? All right. I want everybody to adopt the same here. Let's drop the judgment. Let's make sure that we avoid sweeping statements. And by the way, for your research paper, that's one of the things that you'll find me, opening up the other end, not the felt tippy end, the pouring end of my red pen onto your pages. If you start making general statements that are not supported by evidence or evidentiary citations, that's an instant. Don't do that. We're scholars. Okay. Okay, let us move on. Question number 3. Consider Mackenzie's 9 elements of a media system illustrated as a tree. Do you agree with the author's hierarchical ordering? Now, some of you said, I'm really not very familiar with this. I can't say. That's not a position that you get to take. What I want you to do is to look at, in this case, you look right at the diagram that Mackenzie illustrates, which is really curious. It's like, why are you drawing me a picture, man? Okay, fine. But what is he trying to say? Why is he illustrating this way? So, for instance, down at the bottom, you get this tree. So at the bottom, the soil is the cultural characteristics. All right, which the cultural characteristics provides the nutrients, the sort of the food that drives the philosophy, which in turn, the philosophy gives rise to the regulations. The regulations give rise to the financing, and the financing gives rise to the news reporting. All right, you can comment on that, whether you're familiar with it or not. Okay. Let's see what you had to say. Lua Misher, and if I get your name wrong again, please send me an email and correct me. I like how you answered this. You said, I agree with the author's hierarchical ordering. I love the tree analogy for the elements of a media system. I searched for more information on trees. Interesting way to go about it. Yeah, I'm out of coffee. I found some information in an online magazine. Grant writes about a controversial German forest. An excerpt from the article below. Did you provide the link to the article? I'm not seeing it. I'll have to go back to the discussion board. But I thought it was very interesting. So I'm walking in the Eifel Mountains, Western Germany, through cathedral-like groves of oak and beech. The strange and more feeling of entering a fairy tale. The street, and I've had similar experiences. That's why I think perhaps your answer resonated particularly with me. I've hiked in some of the really, really old forests in Ireland, and I've had the great privilege to hike in most of, well, I should say many of the major mountain ranges of the world: the Alps, the Pyrenees, the Zagros. It's on the border between Iraq, Turkey, and Iran. These sorts of places, and I've seen these, sort of like, whoa, this is sort of fairy tale like. Trees have become vibrant, lay alive, and changed with wonder. They're communicating with one another, for starters. Okay, some are calling it the Wood Wide Web, says Woldenberg in German, accented English. All the trees here in every forest that is not too damaged are connected to each other through underground fungal networks. True. All right, but let's get to what you had to say about Mackenzie. Mackenzie suggests, like a tree, not all elements that compromise the media system are visible at first glance underground. 2 inconspicuous but important elements impact the function of the media system as a tree. And in the illustration, that is the cultural characteristics of the place that you're dealing with, and then the underlying philosophies that come out of that. Okay. I'm curious if maybe some of you think that there might be additional branches or additional elements, or how he ordered these things, if you agree with that. So, for instance, okay, let's say the soil is cultural characteristics. Yeah, okay, fine. But couldn't we say that cultural characteristics shape how the news is reported, which then drives the financing? So, for instance, here in this country, we often hear and people talk about, they say mainstream media, that's the terminology, or sometimes established media or old media as opposed to new media. All right. So you have independent, and I mean independent like nearly single entity, infotainment and info media, Russell Brand, I'm trying to think of his first name. So yeah, Steven Crowder, these sorts of guys that don't belong to networks that dole out information. All right. Now they can do this, many of them, regardless of financing. It's not that regulation drives their financing. It doesn't. Now, those who popped up on YouTube and have experienced demonetization from YouTube are going over to other platforms that don't throttle down monetization regardless of what you put on there. I mean, Rumble is one of them. It's now, developing as a platform to challenge YouTube and allows all kinds of content and allows it to be monetized. And it doesn't come from a central state like the trunk of a tree. All right. So I think there's room, for you to take a look at this. Think about the media landscape that you live in, even if you're not familiar with it in other places, and go, maybe we should reorder these elements, or maybe there are elements that are missing. Okay. All right. Question number 4. Consider the 6 media philosophies presented by McKinsey. What does that mean, a media philosophy? Because, bam, back to the tree again. We have these roots, so they're in his mind essential, all right, to prop up the whole, to feed the whole system. Of the 6 media philosophies presented, which one, in your opinion, best represents the United States of America in the year 2023? Be sure to cite the text in justifying your answer. Lauren, let's see what you did here. McKinsey defines the philosophies for media systems are perceived as root networks that feed the media system with characteristics from surrounding cultures. Okay, so now be sure to sort of unpack for the rest of us. Okay, what does he mean by that? Of the 6 philosophies, the text outlines, I saw the social responsibility as the best overall philosophy to represent the United States. And by the way, I'm not saying there was a right answer for this, because some of you, somebody said, no, we're tilting towards communist. You have very different opinions. That's fine. Make sure that you use evidence if you're writing about this, in a more developed way, say your paper, to support your opinion. Okay. Let's see. I saw social responsibility as the best overall philosophy to represent the United States media today, especially since it was established here in America in the 1940s. When comparing it against some of the other philosophies, I found it noteworthy that social responsibility has particular appeal to societies that desire a proactive but non-intrusive role of the government in the affairs of people. Okay, now some of you took real issue with this. Not you, Lauren, issue, but with this idea. That is, that what our government is up to is desires a proactive but non-intrusive role of government in the affairs of the people. Okay, now this certainly is many people's perspective. But say, for instance, some of the internal information and documents, here sticking to the United States, that's coming out from the new Twitter CEO, that is Elon Musk, which strongly suggest a communicative, I was going to say cooperative, but communicative relationship between government officials, excuse me, and these large media companies, in which people in the government saying, oh, hey, so-and-so is tweeting this, and I want it taken down. Oh, that's dangerous. And Twitter goes, oh, right away, sir, and down the tweet comes, or the individual gets banned. All right. It's a force of habit. Now, we can say we don't want that, collectively, but the question is always, where's the top of the bell curve? There's some that do want more of it, some that want none of it, and then there's all in the middle. Okay. Again, Lauren, very good answer. For which government is okay, here we go. Proactive non-intrusive role, but still has a foundation for which government is intercede with coercive dialogue or laws and media operations gone awry. I think we have seen this where has been the case here. Also, there has been flexibility to grow or further develop this philosophy with ongoing debate and conversation about the role of media and government. Yeah, fair enough. Okay. Now, this was one that, and I like these kinds of questions because I like to see what you think. All right. But remember, when you're developing these opinions in a more expansive research setting, your papers, make sure that you back them up with evidence. I mean, if you look at these 3, you might say, that we're democratic participant, as we have this idea that everybody gets to throw in. And that's why, not only was the internet created here in the United States, but you know, in terms of content that gets cranked out, we crank out an enormous amount that ends up on the World Wide Web. Now, there are other cultures, North Korea, and we're talking about percentage of information weighed against percentage of people that you know, produce enormous amounts of content. Okay, all right, okay, everybody, good job. Be sure to participate in the discussion boards. You know, because when you don't even answer the questions, you reduce the number of responses that your classmates have to answer. You know, can answer to. Because remember, I'm asking you to post answers and response. Don't do that to your classmates, to yourself. Okay, make sure that you do for this week and coming weeks. And if you have any questions about the class presentations or the paper, be sure to email me. All right. Okay, everybody. Thank you so much for all your hard work. I think about you. I pray about you. And look forward to what you have to say this week. And I'll see you on Blackboard. Bye-bye. God bless.